Well, Shabbat Shalom again. Good morning or afternoon or evening, whenever you might be tuning in to watch this. We're going to just cover a bit on Passover. I called this, what I call this, I was going to call it Passover Potpourri, but Passover Points, Passover Points. And we are in Vayikra this week. This is the beginning of the book of Leviticus for the parashah. Now, the parashah, Vayikra, is translates to "and he called," and it starts with chapter 1, verse 1, and goes to 6, verse 7. I want to share some things with you about this. There's an interesting equidistant letter sequence that's embedded, and if you have a Hebrew Bible, you can see this for yourself. Okay, it helps to know a little bit of Hebrew. It helps to have, because the sacred name is embedded at an 8-letter skip. It starts with the first yud, right there, the first yud, and every 8th letter you'll see it goes hey, vav, hey. Okay. Now, interestingly, when you look at the first chapter of Genesis and Exodus, there is a 50-letter skip that spells out Torah in both of those books, and then it goes in reverse in the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy. You can do the very same thing in the very opening chapters of those books. It also has a 50-letter skip that spells Torah, but it faces towards the book of Vayikra, where you have this 8-letter skip of the sacred name. So what is the significance of this? This was a discovery that was found some time ago. And these things don't happen by chance. I mean, these things don't happen by chance. It means something. You've got Torah, and then you've got Torah in reverse and Torah in reverse, pointing towards the sacred name, equidistant letter skip in the middle book, all right? So what's been deducted from that is that, Torah is really about leading us back to the sacred one, right? Hashem. It's about leading us back to him. And the whole focus is about love of him and love of your fellow man. That's what Torah is about. That's what the teachings and instructions are about. And if you're a person who is going to be saying that you love him and want to walk in his ways, then you're somebody who strives to walk in Torah. Okay? That's the only way to have a relationship with him. People say they love him, but they don't pay any attention to the commandments, or to a good portion of the commandments they think don't belong to them. And that's just not logical, and it's not what the equidistant letter sequences are showing us. It's about coming to him. He's the focus. The heart is about having a relationship with the Most High and walking in his ways. All right. There's an amazing thing hidden also in the Aleph Tav placement, which I will share with you from the Aleph Tav scriptures. The Aleph Tav, of course, is the first and last letters of the alphabet. And Yeshua said, I am the Aleph and the Tav. Okay, now that word was translated when they translated the Hebrew text to Greek, the Septuagint, because it was not considered a word. And therefore, it's not in our English Bibles either, all right? But the Aleph Tav is been put back in an English version called the Aleph Tav Scriptures. It's a nice way to take a look at where that is and understand the placement is about Yeshua. He is the Aleph and the Tav, right? So, just going to read this to you, all right? Leviticus 1, verse 2 immediately gets right into the understanding of sacrifice as a picture of Yeshua's presence, represented in the Aleph Tav symbol in any offering to be slaughtered at the temple. Leviticus 1 verse 9 clearly shows us a type and foreshadow of Yeshua, the Messiah, on the altar, because of the Aleph Tav, where it's placed, as the burnt offering being poured out and consumed. These laws clearly establish certain requirements of what is an acceptable sacrifice to achieve atonement or covenant, and they cannot be altered or changed. During the preparations for the burning, the entrails and legs represent the animal's most innermost part of its being. The heart is from which our conduct and Our conduct springs and the internal organs represent our emotions, and the legs represent our walk. Almost all must be cleansed with water before all can be burned on the fire. The burnt offering is cleaned on the inside and then completely consumed. This is a perfect picture of what our devotion to Elohim should look like as covenant children. Just as the gospel writer said when he wrote his epistle, 1 John 2:6, he who says he abides in him ought himself also to walk, just as Yeshua walked. This is what Elohim is desiring of his children to mature toward, due to our access through the Aleph Tav, Yeshua, the Messiah, to the Father. Our access to the Father is through Yeshua, you see, by his Spirit. We are to climb up on the sacred altar and place our flesh, our soul, as a total sacrifice, just as Yeshua did. And this is something we're supposed to do daily before our Father. As bondservants, we are to withhold nothing, but we are to give our all, just as he gave his all toward us. This is the picture of that Aleph Tav that Yeshua, the Messiah, wants us to see in the burnt offering for sin atonement. The burnt offering is painfully costly because it costs us our life on a daily basis. This is what we are required to give in exchange for the forgiveness of our sins. And this is our new covenant obligation at its roots. Did you catch all that? Beautiful. And I don't think I could have said it any better. It's about totally giving yourself, and that's the cost of his giving himself to you and forgiving your sins, is he wants your life. He wants all of you, right? Okay? Concerning the sacrificial offerings on the altar at the temple in the book of Leviticus, the placement of the Aleph Tav clearly shows that any animal or grain or libation, any offering being sacrificed or offered to the Father on the altar with the Aleph Tav in front of the word altar at the temple not only belongs to Yeshua as creator, but once the high priest lays his hands on the animal and accepts the offering, which then sets it apart as sacred by this act, it then is received by Yeshua the Messiah, who then presents the animal's body and blood as a sacrifice before the Father as a sweet savor. If Yeshua did not present it to Yahweh Father, then it could not be received by the Father. It's through him. Let us not forget, Yeshua has always been the mediator between man and the Father from the beginning. Right? So that's just a little bit from the Aleph Tav scriptures. All right. All right. It is spring, and people are getting ready to celebrate the Feast of Passover. I want to talk about that today. Was listening to Brother Zach Bauer, if anybody knows him, but he's a good brother, and he pointed out some things which I thought were very, very enlightening, and I want to share some things with you. You know, an agricultural society at the time of spring, everybody is required at first fruits to go into the field and cut the sheaf and have an offering that they can wave. It's a wave offering. It's required at Habikarim. Okay? They didn't have Facebook thousands of years ago. They didn't rely on one person to go out and find that one or two little heads of barley that are ripe. And then they get on Facebook and go, hey, I found some barley. It's a beef. Okay, it didn't work like that. Okay, because then you have to wait for the next full moon before you can have Passover, which is going to be, you know, roughly a week or two away from that, right? When there's a full moon that's after that. But then the barley has to be ripe enough for everybody to be able to go in the field and cut their sheaf and go in on Habikurim. Okay? In an agricultural society, they waited till it was ripe enough for everybody to have enough to do that. Okay? So anyway, that's the argument against having Passover in March. Now, the problem is everybody wants to try to figure this out. And that's really okay, because, you know, I don't care if you've been at this for 20, 30 years, which, you know, my journey started in 1986. Okay, so it's been 30 years now, 30 years. But I'm a Torah toddler. If I've been doing this for 50 years or 100 years, we're all, in light of the Ancient of Days, we're all Torah toddlers. We're just babies trying to figure this out, okay? And if you want to have Passover in March, you should do that. But don't look down on the people that are doing it in April, or vice versa. If you're having Passover in April, I mean, looking at the folks in March, everybody's trying to figure this out, because from heaven's viewpoint, our Father sees a beautiful thing. He sees people that are trying to walk in righteousness. They're not doing the pagan feasts. They're trying to figure this out. And he's looking down saying, look at my children. They're doing the best they know to keep my feasts as I've commanded them to do. Okay? So it's really a beautiful thing, right? Whenever you do that. The fact is, Messiah has got to come and set us all straight and get us all on the same page, right? And people have tried to form Sanhedrins, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Sanhedrin issue. When you look at the scriptures and how the Sanhedrin got started, it was the authority that was given to Moses, who spoke with Hashem face to face, right? And he gave Moses and his brother Aaron the authority over Israel. And at one point in time, he called together 70 elders, and he said, my spirit that I have given to you, I'm now going to have rest upon them. All right? That was the beginning of the Sanhedrin. And through history, there's always been that Sanhedrin, that 70. It was carried through. There was during the time of the men of the Great Assembly and Nehemiah and Ezra's day, and then on, you had that Sanhedrin. Oh yeah, they've made mistakes. You know, they were responsible for putting Yeshua on the cross, right? But even then, the high priest prophesied, the Spirit still works, that the death of Messiah would bring together all the scattered of Israel. Isn't that amazing? I always thought that was an amazing portion in the Gospel of John. Because as in his office as high priest, he prophesied about the killing of Yeshua that would bring together all of Israel. Amazing. All right? So the authority was given, I said, to Moses, Aaron, the 70 elders, all the way down. And then you had Hillel too, in the 4th century. The last thing that was left of a Sanhedrin. Rome dispersed them in the 4th century. All right, what did they do? They set up a calendar system for worldwide Jewry that we would be able to follow. All right. Now, people have tried to form Sanhedrins since then, but the problem is nobody has the authority to form a Sanhedrin. And besides that, in this world, with everybody wanting to be a chief, and there's not enough Indians, who's going to listen to somebody when they say, hey, we just formed a Sanhedrin? Who's going to give honor to that? Is everybody going to say, okay, we'll listen to you now? No. We know very well that's not going to happen. So this is the reason why years ago I decided that I was going to follow the calendar of Israel, which is the Hillel 2 reckoning for the feasts. Okay? There's a portion in Deuteronomy 17 that talks about being presumptuous. Let's take a look at that. And you know, you can disagree and say you don't believe this and you want to have a different opinion. That's fine. But this is where we stand as a congregation. All right. I think it avoids calendar chaos if you stand with Israel. Stand with Israel on the reckoning of the dates. I think it's presumptuous not to. Take a look. Deuteronomy 17. Starting with verse 9, I guess. Verse 9 is a good place. You shall come unto the priests, the Levites, unto the judge that shall be in those days. See, we don't have a Sanhedrin today. The last thing we had was Hillel 2. Came down from Moses and Aaron to the 70 elders all the way down to Hillel 2 and then was dispersed. Okay? You shall come unto the priests, the Levites, and unto the judge that shall be in those days, and inquire, and they shall show thee the sentence of judgment. Verse 10, and you shall do according to the sentence which they of that place, which Yahweh shall choose, shall show you. And you shall observe to do according to all that they inform you. According to the sentence of the law which they shall teach you, and according to the judgment which they shall tell you, you shall do. You shall not decline from the sentence which they shall show you, to the right hand, nor to the left. And the man that will do presumptuously, and will not hearken unto the priest that stands to minister there before Yahweh your Elohim, or unto the judge, even that man shall die, and you shall put away the evil from Israel. So I consider taking off and, being like a Karaite, okay, or I like to call them Korahites, because it's like standing up against Moses and saying, has not God spoken also to us, right? And things didn't go too well for Korah, did they? Okay, I for one don't want to rise up against the authority that Yahweh put upon Moses. So I'm going to keep the Hillel 2 calendar, and I think, like Zach said, in an agricultural society, it makes more sense that you're going to have more barley available for the people to be able to have the sheaf. Good point, Zach. But again, if you want to keep it in March, keep it in March. All wet, for doing it in April. But I think, we're all toddlers. We're all trying to work this out. Messiah will come. He's the only one that has the authority. He will bring us all together on the same page. The point is, you're not keeping the pagan feast, right? I mean, that's the important thing. And certainly you should not try to do both. Okay, that would be ridiculous. That's kind of like folks that want to do Christmas and Hanukkah. If you've come to the realization that those things are wrong, that mixture is something that Yahweh has never been pleased with in worship, then you shouldn't be taking this on and then also keeping the other. That's just ludicrous. Okay, He wants us to worship Him in spirit and in truth. All right. So at this season, if you've come to realize this and it's something new for you this year, then don't be keeping Easter. Don't call it that. I mean, it's going to be, you can keep Habikurim, first fruit, but don't call it Easter, because that's a pagan goddess. Ishtar, Ashtarte. You're keeping the fertility thing of Rome, of the ancient peoples. Okay, it's all about fertility in the spring. Okay, and you should have nothing to do with that. It doesn't please the Father. He tells us not to even have the names of the gods of other nations upon our lips. So how much it must grieve Him that, I mean, really one of the most important days, if not the most important day in our history, the resurrection of the Messiah, to refer to it as Ishtar? No, that's grievous, and it shouldn't be. You come to this, you should be stepping out of that, leaving your pagan ways, and coming to the keeping of the feasts, as He has commanded us, to walk in His ways, in purity. Okay? Feast days of worship. That's what they are, right? And we should be worshiping in spirit and truth. In terms of Deuteronomy 12, I think we should look at all these things. Sometimes when you teach for so long, you take for granted that people don't know the scriptures, or that you think they do know the scriptures, they've read these things, and they really don't many times. Deuteronomy 12, starting with verse 30. Take heed to yourself that you be not snared by following them after that they be destroyed from before you, and that you inquire not after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. Okay? You shall not do so unto Yahweh your Elohim. For every abomination to Yahweh which he hates have they done unto their gods. So, in other words, you look at the nations and you see what they're doing for their gods, and you say, I like that practice. I'm not going to do it for their gods, but I'm going to do it for him. And that's exactly what mixture is about. When you take the pagan rooted feasts and say, I'm going to make this a feast unto Yahweh. Like Aaron did when they were doing their orgy and carrying on when Moses took up the mountain. He called it a feast. And it didn't go too well for them. Right? So we don't want to do that. Verse 32 says, what things soever I command you, observe to do it. You shall not add thereto nor diminish from it. And then you should look at Leviticus 23. You want to know about the feast? You go to Leviticus 23. It tells you what you're supposed to be keeping. Okay? These are the Edot, the portion of Torah which is called the witnesses or the testimonies, the Edot. Leviticus 23. So, you got that group out there called Jehovah's Witnesses. No, they're not. We're Yah's witnesses if we keep these feasts. That's what the Edot are. Okay? It starts off with the Sabbath. Okay? Speak unto the children, verse 2 of Leviticus 23. Speak unto the children of Israel, and say to them concerning the feasts of Yahweh, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations. Even these are my feasts. Notice, who do they belong to? They belong to him. Okay? 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day, the first feast is the weekly Sabbath. We prophetically proclaim that he is sovereign, and there's something else about this Sabbath. It's prophetic in that it tells us the time of man. Ancient commentaries on the creation week tell us that they knew there would be 1,000 years for a day, and that 6 days would pass 6,000 years. And we're at that place right now in history. So we're going into the Sabbath. The Sabbath millennium is upon us. It's coming. We're right at the verge of it. Every week when we sit down to keep the Sabbath, it's a rehearsal of his coming kingdom. You see, you're a witness to that as his people. He calls the Sabbath a sign between us and him. Then you have the annual feasts. It goes into Passover. Verse 5, in the 14th day of the first month, at even, is Yahweh's Passover. And goes on from there. Okay? The feast that we are to keep. It's right there. Called everlasting ordinances. These are the generation to generation feasts that are supposed to be kept. These witnesses for his people. Okay? Oh, the things that happen because people get separated from their Jewish roots. It's been going on for centuries. Centuries. I was in a bookstore this week and I saw a man hanging around the Bibles and just thought I'd cause some trouble. I walked over there and I said, so you're looking for a new Bible? He said, yeah. I said, you ought to get online and check out the Aramaic English New Testament. Just go to aent.org. His response, nope, KJV only. Okay. And I realized right away what I was dealing with here. And that's a good shield. That KJV only thing works really good against, the adulterated English versions, because there are problems. The NIV and the NASB, there's problems because they're taking out verses and they got footnotes that tell you, oh, well, this wasn't in the earliest manuscripts. Things like that cause all kinds of confusion, and So yeah, I agree. KJV is a great version for studying. I told them I use the KJV. Yeah, I certainly do. But when you turn around and use it in the opposite direction against the Greek and Aramaic and Hebrew, no. Yeah, it's like you're actually going to hurt yourself if you're going to stick with English only. You got to take this thing to another level. Just take it to another level. Start studying. Take a look at what the Hebrew is and what the Aramaic was the first New Testament. Obviously, I mean, when you take a look at the study, you realize it's true. You got to go back and look at the source. You got to. I mean, anybody have a KJV? Take a look at something. Turn to Acts if you have a KJV. Since we're on the topic of Passover, take a look at Acts 12, verse 4. This is a KJV. I'm going to show you some problems. Just a little one. Okay? This is the account when Peter was put in jail. And if you look at verse 4, it says, and when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions, another word user today, of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Now, if you go to a Greek New Testament, you will find that the word for Easter is Pascha. Pascha is Pesach. Why did the translators decide to use the word Easter? KJV only. Careful with that. Okay? Problem. It wasn't Easter that was said. It was Pascha. Pesach. Okay? But we have problems. We're supposed to keep Passover. And not just if you're Jewish. I mean, it's not, it's like, turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 5. You know what I mean? You get like me. I'm like, God, people. All right. 1 Corinthians 5. 1 Corinthians 5. Start tripping over yourself. 1 Corinthians 5. Look at this. This is Paul talking to Greeks. Okay? He says in verse 7, purge out therefore the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, as you are unleavened. For even Christ, our Passover, reading for the King KJV, for even Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us. Verse 8, therefore, let us keep the feast. See? He's telling Greeks to keep it. All right? Paul was teaching all the churches to walk in Torah. Part of Torah is keeping the feasts. Right? Okay. Now, here's the problem. And I'm going to talk about just one example when people get divorced from their Hebrew roots. Okay? Centuries ago, Gentiles got a hold of this Hebrew book. They had a hold of the translation, okay? Translation from the original. And they're looking at these things, and they're not talking to anybody Jewish, and they don't have any Jewish background, okay? They were raised up as pagans, as children. And they take this thing, and they start reading without any connection to Judaism, without any connection to Hebrew. And they come up with stuff. For example, Good Friday. Now, where did that come from? Okay. Well, it came from somebody reading where it says that it was a Sabbath, that they were rushing to bury his body. It was a Sabbath, right? Well, Sabbath is Saturday. That's easy. So it must have been a Friday. Okay? Plain and simple. Well, the problem with that is that Yeshua was very specific about how long he would be in the grave. Okay? He said 3 days and 3 nights. Okay? And the argument is you just can't get 3 days and 3 nights out of Friday to Sunday morning. All right? It's only 2 nights and 1 day. Oh, that's okay. That's not important. Okay, well, that's a slippery slope. If you start saying that the things that Messiah was specific about, if you're saying that wasn't important, where else is the logic going to lead you? He said 3 days and 3 nights. Okay? So let me present this to you. Okay? If it was a Wednesday, if he died, and unleavened bread, the first day of unleavened bread, which can be on a Sunday, it can be on a Monday, it can be any day of the week, right? Let's say that it was on a Thursday that year. So he dies on a Wednesday, and they're preparing to get him off the cross because of unleavened bread, a weekday, but a Sabbath, okay? All right? But then there's the day after that, which is prep, and it's you know, again, he said 3 days and 3 nights, but then there's another Sabbath. I suggest you've got 2 Sabbaths, and this is not something I've come up with by myself. It's something that Scripture actually backs. All right? Because if you compare Luke 23:56 with Mark 16:1, you will see that there were 2 Sabbaths. So let's take a look at this. Go to Mark. This is a discrepancy. Sometimes these discrepancies, they just get read right past. People don't read their Bibles. Many people don't read their Bibles. They just go along with, you know, Good Friday and Easter Sunday, right? Mark 16:1 says, and when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Salome, had bought sweet spices. Okay, so if he dies on a Friday, we're talking about the weekly Sabbath passing, right? Then they went and bought sweet spices, right? That they might come and anoint him. And then very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they came into the sepulchre. Okay, now, if we didn't have Luke's account, this might work. Turn to Luke. Luke 23, and go to verse 56. Here, Luke says, and they returned and prepared spices and ointments and rested the Sabbath day. Now, wait a minute. Hold up. Mark said that they waited until the Sabbath was passed before they could buy the spices. But Luke says they prepared the spices, but oops, they had to rest on the Sabbath. I say both accounts are right. I say Thursday, unleavened bread, was a Sabbath. I mean, they weren't prepared for his being crucified. This was a surprise to everybody, right? It wasn't like they looked on the calendar a week before and said, well, you know, the Messiah's going to get crucified, so we better hurry up and buy those spices and get him ready because, you know, we got to be ready for that. No, he was crucified on a Wednesday, the 4th day of the week. Thursday was the Sabbath. They couldn't buy spices. They had to wait. They bought the spices as soon as they could. But preparation day is a busy day for a Jewish woman. Not only were they preparing the spices, but they had to get ready for the weekly Sabbath. Before you know it, the day is over. It's time to go into the Sabbath. And the first chance they had was the first day of the week, and he was already gone. Why? Because Yeshua was risen from the dead when the sun was setting on Saturday night. Yeah, That's right. Otherwise, it would have been 4 nights. He was dead a Wednesday, Thursday, and a Friday night, a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday. A Thursday, Friday, and a Saturday. All right. About the same time when the people were in the field, chiefs for their wave offering on Habikurim, on the first day of the week, that's when Yeshua had already risen from the dead. And I wouldn't be surprised if he walked right through the field and they didn't even know it. That'd be the kind of thing he would do. So there you have it. There's 2 Sabbaths. And there's more to this. The whole idea of 3 days is all the way through the scriptures. Yeshua referred to Jonah being in the belly of a fish for 3 days and 3 nights. A prophetic foreshadowing, right? But there's more. Look at Genesis 22. This is an amazing thing. Genesis 22 is the crucifixion chapter, isn't it? Isn't it amazing? 22. It's interesting how numbers work like this. 22 is this Tav, this 22nd letter of the alphabet, right? And Tav in Paleo is what? Right? And so, same thing with Psalm 22, all about they pierced my hands and my feet, right? Here in Genesis 22, you have Abraham taking his son Isaac to the mountain. And Isaac is carrying the wood upon his back, right? And he's taken to the very place, the very same mountain ridge where Yeshua died, right? It's amazing. Probably the very same spot. I wouldn't be surprised in the way God does things. But look at this. Genesis 22 verse 4 says, "Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off." Okay. Prophetic. He looked up on the 3rd day and he saw. What did he see? Okay. See, this is one of those places where you have to take this to another level of understanding. Take it to like maybe I don't know, Remez. What is this alluding to? What is it that he would look out and see? Perhaps he was seeing more than what the text is telling us. Perhaps Yah was opening his eyes to see a fulfillment of something through this offering of his son Isaac. Right? On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. Interesting. 3rd day. Hosea 6 verse 2. Amazing portion of prophecy. Hosea, right after Daniel. "Come and let us return unto Yah, for he has torn and he will heal us. He has smitten and he will bind us up. After 2 days will he revive us. In the 3rd day he will raise us up." This is speaking of Israel, prophetically. But Messiah, the personification of Israel, out of Egypt have I called my son. Well, that's true about Israel. But it's also true about Messiah, because he had to go to Egypt and get called out after Herod was dead. Parallels often through the scriptures we see of Israel and the Messiah. So here again, after 2 days will he revive us. After 2 millennium, what's happening? You see, Israel is coming. The church is waking up to Torah. And Jews are coming to know Yeshua at an unprecedented level. After 2 days, he will revive us. In the 3rd day, he will raise us up. I would submit to you that it's when we're already in the 3rd day, in that millennium, that's when the resurrection is going to take place. And Messiah was raised at the end of the 3rd day. But the resurrection, well, some say there's going to be a resurrection at the end as well. But, the resurrection of the dead, and then perhaps eschatology, perhaps we're not there yet, so we don't know. Perhaps it's going to be that there will be those that die during the millennium, but they'll be raised back up. I know there's going to be a resurrection and a great white throne judgment for the wicked. All right. I've always believed that it was David, Moses, and all the righteous from the past that would be sharing in the millennium. So they're going to have to be raised before it begins, right? So anyway, there you go. Third day, constant. And there's something else, prophetic. It's an amazing thing about the fourth day of the week, and that's what Wednesday is. It's the fourth day of the week, right? Well, see, the rabbis, the ancients knew. They saw in Isaiah 46:10. Look at Isaiah 46:10. We're going to flip around a little bit. Isaiah 46:10 says this: declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times to things that are not yet done. They saw this and they said, how is the end declared from the beginning? Hey, let's go back to the beginning. See what this means, right? So you go back to Genesis chapter 1. And from this, you have an outline for the time of man in the 6 days of creation and the seventh day of rest. And the commentary says there'll be 2,000 years of chaos, 2,000 years of Torah instruction, 2,000 years of a Messianic age, and 1,000 years of a millennial rest. Wow, it sounds like a theology, doesn't it? I mean, when it talks about 1,000 years reigning with Messiah, that's the Sabbath rest that the ancients talked about. And we are at the 6,000 mark now. All right? But what happened on the fourth day? It says in verse 3 of Genesis 1, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. And the ancient sages say this is Mashiach. This light was that primordial light. Yeshua says, I'm the light of the world. This is the light of Messiah, they say. Amazing. All right? But the embodiment of that light, the sun, the moon, and the stars were not created until the fourth day. Look at verse 14. God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. Interestingly, in the word for lights here, where it says lights, orot, okay, it's a plural form of ur, right? But there's a vav missing. It's a diminished spelling. I find this fascinating. It's diminished from what was used in verse 3. Why? Well, because Messiah had to diminish himself in, as it says in Philippians, he put aside his glory, really, and embodied himself in flesh in order to come down here and interact with us and save us. Okay? So the Most High, the Eternal One, has to diminish himself to embody himself. But did he do that? It was the fourth day of creation. Okay, so it makes sense that it would be the fourth day of the work week that the Messiah would come and die for the sins of the world. Mankind waited for 4 millennial days. Therefore, it was the fourth day of the week when he comes and gets his life. Okay? So, see, all this is if you're disconnected from Hebraic understanding, if you're disconnected from the scriptures, and a bunch of Gentiles get together and start reading this Jewish book and trying to do it on their own and not ask questions. See, this is the same problem we have today with pronunciation of Yeshua's name, right? People want to pronounce it all sorts of ways. When if you would just take the time to learn a little bit of Hebrew, you'd find out that some of those names you're coming up with have no existence prior to this day. Okay? It's just another dividing factor. The enemy wants to divide us on everything. I say Yahusha, and you say Yahushua, and look at how it's written. All right? How was it spoken? What was the name that was given by the angel? Look at the Aramaic. Okay? If he was called Yeshua in the Aramaic in the day, then why do you want to call him something else? Because you want to be more proper? Okay? It's silly. It is. You know, to think that you know better than everybody through the centuries. But this is the problem I'm talking about. It goes on and on and on with problems like this. All sorts of little things that divide us. All because give heed to the authority that was passed down from Moses to Aaron to the 70 elders. They don't have any connection with Judaism. They consider it to be a curse to talk about Jewish, commentary, oh, stay away from the Talmud. They pride themselves on, I figured this out myself. And we're all just a bunch of Torah toddlers. We're all just a bunch of Torah toddlers. But I think there needs to be respect to the Jewish, the Hebrew, and taking a look at, the way things have been done and the way that's been said. Okay? Otherwise, you're too many chiefs, not enough Indians, folks. And it divides. And then people look down their nose at one another. Because they think they've been walking in this thing for 5 years and they're an expert at everything. Okay? I'll be the first one to tell you, I'm not an expert. I am not. And I've been at this for 30 years. Okay? I'm still learning. And I've learned to give respect and honor to where it's due. Okay? I believe in walking in truth, but I also believe we should stand united. People talk about being united with Israel, and they do everything they can to divide themselves from her in their doctrine and in their speech. Anyway, what do you think? We just, and there's, a little bit of humility goes a long way too. Just, sometimes people want to get into an argument with me. I'm like, no, I'm just whatever. That's fine. Somebody said, Yeshua didn't do forums. All these people on Facebook don't want to talk about things and try to prove they're right. I don't do that. I won't do that. I will teach, and if I don't know something, I'll tell you. But it's best to not get into squabbles, especially when we're all just a bunch of toddlers. We're all just trying to work this thing out. And I'm so glad. We live at a time Messiah is coming. He's going to come in our lifetime. He's coming very soon. And we're all going to get all this straightened out. All this is going to get straight when he comes. I just don't want to be ashamed because I cut off my brothers for something because they didn't, they were doing a different day. I've got friends right now. They're going to keep Passover in March, and that's fine. That's fine. I'm keeping it in April. If I was with them, I would keep it with them too. Same thing with Shavuot. Every year we go through this. Some are diligently keeping the 6th Sivan, and others want to keep it at first. Keep it. If you got brothers that are doing it on that day, go ahead. I mean, gosh, we're not doing pagan feasts, right? We're all trying to do this thing right. If we're going to walk in righteousness, then let's have it from the heart. Let's have righteousness from the heart. Not just in the keys, but let's do it from the heart with love. Right? Okay? And help your Christian brothers if you can. Help those that are coming and are still in Christianity. Help them see that, there's issues. You can be KJV only, but when it comes to things like translation issues where it says Easter when it's really Pascha in the Greek, come on. Take your study to another level, okay? And know that Yeshua meant what he said. When he said 3 days and 3 nights, he meant it. Some of these traditions have got to go. They really do, because they're just so wrong, It keeps us from being a people that walk in truth, that worship in spirit and truth. It requires taking some steps that's going to keep you away from the herd mentality if you're going to be somebody who worships in spirit and truth. But there's plenty of us out here, so you're not alone. You're in good company. All right, we're going to end today. Thank the Father for his word, for his truth, his goodness. Father, we're grateful for the word. We're grateful to you for your spirit. We see an awakening taking place worldwide. People are coming into the truth. They're coming to know you. They're coming to Torah. Father, I pray for a unity of brothers. I pray for hearts that are humble. And Father, that we all would recognize that we are just your children trying to work this thing out. Help us to walk in love. Help us to unite and not divide over little things or big things, to stay united with one another. If we stand with Israel, and we stand with Torah, we stand with Messiah, let us be united in all these things. We pray in the name of Yeshua. Amen. Yivarechecha Adonai Yishmarecha Ya'ara Adonai Panav Alecha Yivunecha Yisa Adonai Panav Alecha V'yaseh Lecha Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May the light of his countenance shine upon you, and may he be gracious to you and give you peace. In the name of Yeshua, our Messiah. Amen.